Okay. Hi, my name's Chris Marsh. I work for AKQA. So one of the founders of AKQA and the current CEO, Ajaz Ahmed, recently wrote a book, or co-authored a book, called Velocity. Has anyone here read it? Excellent. The rest of you, buy it. It will change your life. And please, somebody feed back to Ajaz that I'm plugging his book here. That would be very much appreciated. So in the book, Ajaz talks about how advertising is pollution, which might sound like a bit of a weird thing to say for somebody in our business. What he's talking about really is that traditional advertising, it's all about getting eyeballs on something. As many people as you can possibly have looking at this thing that you produce and then see if you can get something concrete out of it. It's the equivalent of basically taking a massive stick of dynamite and throwing it in the lake to get that one big carp you've been after for quite some time. So a good example of this is compare the market. So basically this advert, it's based on lowest common denominator stuff. If somebody has a different accent, they pronounce a word and it sounds similar to another word, and that's funny, right? But it's hammered home to you over and over and over again. Okay, it's just thrust into your face. It's a mnemonic. They're hacking your brain to get this into your mind so that when you need to use a similar service, it will pop up and then you'll use it. Okay, it's pollution. It doesn't contribute anything. It's not culturally significant. It's basically rubbish, but it does the job. So here's another good example. Go compare. Okay, again, it's the same thing. It's annoyance. It's that catchy tune that just gets into your head and pollutes your mind. Okay, and yeah, it's effective. I found myself using the website myself, even though I hate the adverts. The thing is, you can see it's... Okay, it doesn't stop there. Go away. I jump off a cliff. Yeah, you know, there are loads of these. And I mean, even Go Compare themselves, they acknowledge this. So they now have adverts where the guy is being, well, lots of horrible things happen to him. So they acknowledge the fact, and they're actually kind of bringing it up to zero. They're telling you that they're rescuing you from this. So if advertising is pollution, if that's the problem, what's the solution? So the solution at AKQA is engagement through software. So we're doing the opposite, or we're trying to do the opposite. So instead of just going for that massive marketplace and just trying to get everybody looking at the same thing, it's about finding your particular market, narrowing down who you want to engage with, and then giving them something through software that actually augments their life. So instead of just trying to hack their brain, you're giving them something that makes their life better. So there are three broad categories of this kind of software that we produce. So there's useful. So an example here is EcoDrive. So this is useful. It allows you to look after the environment, basically gathers metrics from your car. It saves you money, whatever's your bag. If you want to save money, you can save money. If you want to look after the environment, you do that as well. So that's useful. Then we've got entertaining. So we've got Star Player here, which I'm going to talk about in a bit more detail in a minute. That's basically a game for football fans that they can play along when they're watching football. And then we've got enriching. So Nike Fuelband, we've got the Make It Count campaign here. This is enriching. Anybody got a Nike Fuelband? One? So basically the Nike Fuelband, just you wear it all the time and it tracks your activity. So for example, it motivates me to walk up the escalators instead of riding. It just basically, I sit at a desk all day. It just keeps me to a base level of activity. So that enriches my life. So this is the idea. So, okay, we're an agency producing software. How have we produced software in the past? So we'll have a strategy phase. That's the creative bit. We'll work with the client. We'll figure out what that creative idea is, what the strategy is. Once we've done that, we go into a discovery phase where we basically do a feasibility study. All the crack-smoking creatives have given us this thing that we now have to build. Can we actually build it? Yes, we can. So then we go into our development phase, we develop it, produce the output, and then we go through UAT, it's accepted by the users, and then we go into release and BAU mode. So you'll notice that the arrows are backwards there. That's just because the presentation's been mangled. I can guarantee we never go from BAU back to strategy. So that development phase there, through development through to UAT, release, and BAU. So we try and be agile. We have been agile in the past to an extent. I very much subscribe to Jagdeep's point that it's about a lifestyle, it's not about a particular methodology. We work with different clients, so it can't be prescribed in that way. But what we got here, you see, in that box, that development box and the following boxes, we do go through iterations here, but then you've still got the integration, you've still got the release and operation. You definitely get some benefits, but not really all the way there. So that's how an agency might produce software. How does everyone else produce software? So Facebook, I read that from Mark Zuckerberg or whoever it is signing off on a concept, it's 6 weeks till it's out in production. Flickr, well, they do, I think, about 50 releases. Last time I checked, they do about 50 releases a week to production again. Instagram, well, everybody knows about that. It's $0 to $1 billion in what, 2 years? 13 guys on the books at the end of that. The Guardian, I read a really interesting article or blog post about The Guardian. So they do a lot of continuous deployment stuff where they're basically doing QA and production. So, wow. If that's how everybody else produces software, then obviously we have found ourselves with some work to do. So I'm being a little bit disingenuous because actually we do pretty well. And I think there are lots of companies out there that do it worse than us. But I'm making the point. So I mentioned startups in my title. So let me give you some context about my perspective. So I've worked before AKQA. I know it's difficult to tell with my youthful complexion that I could have ever had a career before AKQA, but I did. So I've worked with 2 startups. Vistaprint was wildly successful, market cap of about $1.25 billion at the moment. So that's a success. I worked with iSyndica, ran out of runway, and they are no more. If you read about, there are articles online, actually interviews with the founders of iSyndica. Their problem was they couldn't pivot. So they had an idea, they had the technology, they just couldn't move towards something that was generating any revenue. So why am I talking about startups? Well, I look at the work that we do at the agency and I see a lot of similarities between the project work that we do and the startups that I've worked with. So with a project, we have that strategy phase, we have that cycle. It's concept to realization. It's like a startup. You have to find that concept and then you have to realize it. There is a fixed runway. The company doesn't go under if we don't make that runway, but we lose clients. If we tell a client that we're going to get to a certain point by a certain time, then it needs to happen, especially given the fact that there are often tie-ins to other things happening in the world. And small teams. So we have relatively small teams. We're a big company as far as agencies go, but we do have small teams working on these projects. So that's how I see the similarity being with startups. However, the reason I say it's a fat startup is it is a large organization. There's lots of process. There are lots of people. You have to have departments. You have to have teams. You have to have people with different disciplines because we need to be able to resource projects. We need to be able to get the right people onto the right projects. And kind of having this massive pool of people who can kind of do different specialities, but we're not really going to talk about that. We'll just throw them all in. That's not going to work for us right now. So how do we take this fat startup where we have these silos, we have these teams, and we have to resource people, and how do we eliminate waste? How do we get away from that kind of very linear view of how you produce software that I showed you earlier? So there are 3 main areas we've been concentrating on. So that's testing through prototyping, rapid beta launches, and continuous delivery. So, testing through prototyping. Star Player, I mentioned to you earlier, this was a Heineken project. So this is basically a dual screening thing. We started off with the insight that 70% of people that watch UCL football matches do so alone, and they use other devices, tablets, smartphones, this kind of thing. So we came up with the concept of having this game which allowed you to play in real time along with the football match and also engage with your friends through social means. Okay, so that's what Star Player is. So there were immediate and obvious technical difficulties with this, one of which is latency. So depending on where you are in the world, there's going to be a delay between what you're seeing on the television and what's live. So depending on the degree of this latency, you could end up with a product which meant that some people were seeing the answers to the questions that were being pushed through to them and then kind of automatically winning. So there's kind of a big technical piece around this, figuring this out, and that's expensive, right? So how would we go about eliminating that waste? Well, what we did is we looked at the game itself and we decided to play a paper game. So if you look if you look at successful games over the years, you've got chess, drafts, Monopoly, all these kind of things. They don't require electronics or whiz-bang or internet or any of those things. The concept of the game is good enough that you can just play it and enjoy it. So we played it on paper. We had paper, we had a guy running the game, and we had a bunch of people in the room, and we played a video of a football match, and you know what? Everybody just loved it. So what's the cost for that? It's minimal. It's just paper and pens. You've already got the concept. So that was a very effective way to prototype whether or not the concept held water. So after we'd done that, the next thing was actually to tell whether or not the electronic version of the game was going to be any good. So again, did we want to actually start solving some of these technical problems? No, we didn't. So we got a bunch of our creative research and design guys, and they spent 4 days, and what they did was they mocked up something which played on the phone. They took a pre-existing video of a football match, and they synced it all up so that the game experience was identical to what it would be, but of course you could only play it with that particular, you had to run the game in the room. So we played this with the client, and again, for 4 days worth of prototyping work, the client absolutely loved it, and we'd proved the point that it was now worth investing in that time and money to figure out if we could actually meet the technical challenges. So challenges to be met, knowing when it makes sense. Okay, so it doesn't always make sense to do this. In this particular case, this was a good tactic to go through. Sometimes it's not. Sometimes the client will not buy into it. Culturally, they're not quite there yet. Sometimes it's just too expensive to do the prototyping. There are times when you've got to figure that out. And the second thing, crucially for an agency, is letting go. So there are these silos. There are these people with expertise. There's a lot of reassurance in the fact that you can get the right guys on the job, and you can set them off, and you can have a predictable outcome. With this kind of prototyping exercise, what you need is 1 guy or 2 guys or however many that you can trust that can just do cross-functional stuff. You don't need the whole ceremony associated with everything else, and that takes a lot to let go. It takes a lot to trust that, say, 1 software engineer to actually do a bunch of stuff that's outside his usual remit. So rapid beta launch, again talking about star player. So once we'd solved those initial technical problems, well, we didn't solve them, we just blocked the markets that had too much latency. But once we'd made that decision, once we'd figured out that was the way to go, we then needed to have a beta launch. So it was identifying what Eric Ries would call the minimum viable product in his lean startup book. So language is important. If we start talking about minimum something to our clients, they want to hear magnificent and stupendous and enormous and vast and these kind of things. So it's better, language is really important, so it's better to talk about core products for us, these kind of things. So this was a soft launch, an internal beta launch, and it was the core game. So there weren't any leaderboards, there weren't any of that kind of stuff. It was the ability to just play the game with a live match. We launched this, we played it with the client, beta tested it, solved a few problems, and it was a great success. So, challenges to be met. Well, there are quality features trade-off. So when you are producing your beta, depending on the brand that you're working with, it may be more beneficial to find early adopters who are going to put up with bugs, but depending on the brand, that may be unacceptable. So in this case, it may be the case that you want to drop down the features to a minimum set and ensure that any feature that you release is absolutely bang on the money. So there's a trade-off there, and that's something that we would have to decide depending on the client. Heineken, for example, is a premium brand, so when it goes out to the public, it cannot be buggy. So in that case, what we did was we had staged releases where we added leaderboards, Facebook Friends leaderboards, this kind of functionality. Interestingly, we learned that nobody plays on Facebook, and because we had those staged releases, that allowed us to just kill that line of development early. Client resistance. This goes against a lot of the kind of attitudes that clients have when working with digital agencies. They want the big bang approach. They want to have the fanfare and the jazz hands and launch this thing that's just going to be awesome. So it's getting around that sometimes, changing people's minds culturally. And of course, external dependencies. Jagdeep touched on this as well. If you have external dependencies, if you have people working on things partners working on things in parallel, and they're not ready, then you can't beta launch. So continuous delivery. I guess you're probably all aware of what continuous delivery is. Let me just give you my quick view of it. So there's the diagram of the Agile 101 underneath here. Instead of this kind of thing, what we're doing is we're producing feature by feature here, and we have the ability to deploy any feature we want into a production environment or a production-like environment. So we've been working with Nissan on a platform for them, a digital platform, and we are working in the continuous delivery way with that particular client. So this has worked really well, but this started off with a client not wanting to work in this way at all. They wanted the Big Bang approach. They wanted a release that was happening, I don't know, 3 months down the line, 6 months down the line, whatever that was. So we said, okay, well, that's fine. We can do that. We're going to work this way internally, and we're going to expose the staging environment to you guys so you can take a look at it. So, of course, we started releasing these features into the staging environment because the client's looking at this. Of course, they start asking the question, well, why on earth aren't we putting this out in front of the public? So that led to us doing production releases twice weekly for this particular client. Can't do this with all clients, but this was a particularly good project. It's worked very well for us. So challenges to be met here. There is an upfront cost. There's a cost associated with this. There are tools. There's learning. There's maintenance of some of these tools. We're just constantly tweaking. It's not so we thought to start with it would be something where we could set up the tools and the processes. That would be an upfront cost, and that's then done. It turns out there's a lot of maintenance that's associated with this kind of thing. Again, client resistance. I touched on that with this particular client, and again, external dependencies. If you have a feature that needs to be released and it depends on something that's not ready, you can't release it. So is lean thinking a silver bullet? Hands up anyone who thinks there are any silver bullets. No. We all know there are no silver bullets. It's very important not to sort of jump onto this. There are a few successes that we have in the agency, and I think you can apply it everywhere. We work with clients on their strategy. We have long-standing relationships. The actual development and delivery is sometimes a small part of what we do with clients. So it's very important not to kind of jump onto this and consider that we should apply this kind of thinking everywhere to everything we do as an agency. It's understanding where to apply it. So, in conclusion, at AKQA, the 3 things that we've done to try and reduce waste and look at how we can become more lean: testing through prototyping, rapid beta launch, and continuous delivery. Final thought I'd like to leave you with is lean at AKQA. It is not something we treat as a methodology. It's a philosophy that informs the way that we approach problem solving. Thank you.